Here at Coach Parry, we work with many athletes in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and even older. I'm here to tell you that there are certain things that once you hit 50, you need to stop doing. I'm Devlin Eden from CoachParry.com, and I'm going to hand over to Shona to get us started.
Runners over 50 really need to stop running every day. The reason we don't want you running every day is that we're focusing on the recovery aspects here. As we get older, we need to allow for more recovery time. If you've been watching any of our videos, you would have learned now that we don't actually get the benefits of the training while we're doing it. We get the benefit when we rest and recover. And so as we're getting older, we have to allow for more recovery time. And so running every day doesn't ever allow you to get that recovery time and to get a little bit faster and stronger. So we want to allow just for an extra day or two within your week to allow for that recovery time to allow you to get the benefits of your training. We understand that for a lot of people, running or doing activity every day is a big part of looking after their mental health. And I really agree with that aspect, is using exercise to help your mental health. But running every day will have negative effects on your physical being, and so we can find other ways that we want to look after our mental health by perhaps adding in things like cross training. You will still get that really good endorphin kick by doing something that isn't necessarily running, but is still exercise or training related.
The next thing you've got to stop is you've got to stop comparing yourself to the younger version of yourself. And this is something that my dad has done really well from quite early in his 50-plus running career. As soon as he realized that he would never be able to get back to 2:20 for the marathon, he stopped worrying about his PBs and started keeping track of his season's best. So essentially this year, he tries to get himself as close to the runner he was last year. And this has been a tactic that has worked so successfully for him that he often can beat last year's times. But if we look back 3 or 4 years, then you can see that very gradual slowing down. But by setting himself these realistic short-term goals that are based on something where he is now and realistic, he's managed to keep himself in the game and slow down very slowly over the past 10 years.
Another thing that you should stop doing when you hit 50 is acting like you are still 20. And I'm not saying get old, that's not my thing. We often hear the saying that you're only as old as you feel or as old as you act. Let's use an example. We're all young, we go out in the week, we can stay out till all hours of the night, have a really big party, and still wake up early and either go for a run or go to work the next day and feel as fresh as a daisy. When you get 50, I can promise you now, there's a very few people that can actually still do that. The margins for error are a lot smaller the older we get. When you were 20, you could bounce back really quickly from a training session, from a night out, for example, whereas the older we get, and in particular over the age of 50, those margins for errors and making those kind of mistakes become a lot smaller. It affects your training, it affects what you do on a daily basis, and as a result, puts you at a higher risk of getting injured. It also means your recovery between training sessions are that much longer. We need to just make sure that those, as I mentioned, the margins for error for certain things we could do when we were in our 20s, we unfortunately cannot do when you get 50 years and older.
Another thing runners over 50 need to stop doing is stop skimping on your sleep. Sleep is so important. When we're talking about recovery, it is the most important aspect of your recovery. It's where the body regenerates, it's where the body just allows it to recover, to allow you to get better for that next session. There's numerous studies showing when there's lack of sleep or lack of quality of sleep, and how that has a detrimental effect on our stress and our stress hormones and our actual physical and mental well-being. One of the really important things about sleep that I don't think a lot of people realize is that if you go to sleep before around 10 p.m, the body has this natural release of really important hormones that help recovery, that help performance. So things like a release of growth hormone, things like a release of testosterone, that happens naturally, and that is partly why sleep is so good for your performance and your recovery, is because we get that natural release of those hormones. If you're going to sleep after that, you've almost missed that window. And so that is partly why the quality and the time of your sleep is quite key. But we really want to ensure that that is before 10 p.m. or in and around that sort of time. That leads me into the next aspect, which is the quality of sleep. So yes, some people say, oh well, you know, I'm sleeping for 8 hours or 9 hours, but really it's the quality of your sleep. So obviously you know that we have different sleep cycles, and how much time we spend in that deep sleep is really, really key. Of course, this isn't something that you can really control, like, okay, I'm going to make sure I sleep really well, but you can control other aspects of what we call good sleep hygiene. So ensuring that your room is really dark, or staying away from blue lights before you go to bed. So things like your cell phone and your laptops and TVs. Those are little aspects that you can control to help control the quality of your sleep that you're getting. The next thing that we really want to focus on is the quantity of sleep, right? So we've spoken about the quality and making sure that you're getting good sleep. We also really want to focus on the amount of sleep that you're getting. So if you're only getting 4 hours of sleep a night, that's really going to have a detrimental effect on your recovery, on your performance. And so we want to make sure that we're getting a good number of hours of sleep. And the science will literally say anything more than 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night is what is recommended. If you're getting less than 7 hours of sleep a night, it's going to have very detrimental effects on your training, on your performance, and the science shows that can lead to higher risk of illness and higher risk of injury as well. I know that the both of those aspects, both the quality and the quantity of sleep, becomes a bit of an issue as we're going through peri or post menopause. Things like insomnia, things like night sweats are going to impact your sleep, the hours and the quality thereof. And I know that is of course going to affect your sleep and your training and your performance. I don't have the silver bullet answer for you to say this is what you need to do to fix that. I have spoken to many athletes who really recommend some hormone replacement therapy that has helped with those menopausal symptoms that can then aid in ensuring that you're getting good sleep. Please speak to your physician about that, as it's not a one sort of blanket approach that fits all, but those little aspects can help your performance. Again, maybe just reiterating the things you can control. So ensure that you are sleeping in a cool environment. Make sure that if you do suffer from night sweats, that you have an air conditioner or a fan that can maybe help, and that you're sleeping in light cotton sheets, and just working on the things that you can control then to try and aid that you're getting a little bit more sleep.
As the process of slowing down through aging starts, we often try to compensate for that by working much harder, or thinking that in order to prevent that decline in speed, we have to work harder than we did before, and that it's normal to be tired and more sore, because that shows us that we're doing the work that's going to prevent us from getting slower. The reality is that the absolute opposite is true, that as we start slowing down, we can reverse that process in the short term by doing the right things and by training differently to how we trained when we were younger, by manipulating our training volumes and our training loads and our training frequencies so that we improve our body's recovery processes, and that will then allow some short-term improvements which will allow you to hang on to the speed that you're at now for much longer. But the most important part of that is that once that slowing down really begins in earnest, we can make that line much more gradual and keep you faster relative to your peers for much longer.
Another thing that you really need to stop doing over the age of 50 is avoiding strength training. To give you an idea, from the age of 30, we already have a decline, or we start declining in our muscle mass and our muscle ability and strength as a whole. As we get over the age of 50, that decline actually accelerates. So we start at a much higher rate, start declining in our muscle mass. Unfortunately, you're never going to stop the decline in strength. That's just one of those things of aging, unfortunately. However, by doing strength training or adding strength training, you can slow down the rate of decline of muscle mass. It becomes absolutely key for us to really be focusing on the right kind of strength work as well. So we talk about strength training. I'm not saying you have to be in a gym throwing steel around, lifting big weights, doing heavy Olympic lifts. That's not what I'm saying at all. The right kind of work is key. So if you're new to strength, things like body weight squats, body weight push-ups, just lifting yourself up, dips off a chair, for example, body weight resistance training is really good. From there, you would naturally build up like you would with your running, for example. The fitter, the faster you get, the more improvement, and the faster you can run. The same would apply in your strength training. So starting really slow, making sure you're doing the technique right, getting the right kind of exercises in, and then from there adding some weight, adding a bit more resistance, adding a bit more intensity into the kind of training sessions. That really helps us lay a good foundation and a good solid structure to our muscles, to our body, that we're reducing the risk of injury rather. Not only reducing the risk of injury, but we're also boosting our running performance. It gives us a more solid base to be pushing off on every running stride, keeping our posture upright, and that in itself, you will see a difference in the actual performance of your running at the same time. Like I mentioned earlier, we talk about those margins for error. When we were younger, we could get away with not doing strength training. The reality of it is we were probably lifting things and carrying things around the house. We were doing some form of strength work without calling it strength work, so indirectly getting it done. Whereas the older we get, we might be sitting a little bit more. Most of us still work. You're still going to be sitting behind a desk working for a fair amount of time. So us actually getting strength training done now has to become more of a conscious decision, a conscious effort to actually be focusing on doing the strength training for limiting those margins of errors. If you are not doing strength training yet, or if you are and would like a couple of new ideas, click on the link on screen now. We've put together a free master strength training program for you.
The next thing runners over 50 need to do is stop under fueling. I see this so often, is that we're not giving our body the energy or the fuel that it needs for the amount of activity that we're doing. This is across the board. This is men and women. You're just not giving your body the fuel it needs to what you're asking it to do. So often use this analogy is that if you're heading out on a vacation, you don't leave for your vacation in your car with half a tank of fuel. You make sure that tank is full so you can head out on the road. And so the same thing applies into your training. Make sure that your body has enough fuel for the amount of exercise and activity that you're asking it to do. As we get older, this becomes even more important. Then we have this natural loss of muscle mass as we get older. That happens naturally, and we have to ensure that we're giving our muscles the protein that it needs to build on that muscle mass that we're losing naturally, and of course the glucose or the carbohydrate that we're using. We want to ensure that we are giving our body enough of that muscle glycogen to ensure that it's got enough energy to do the activity that we're asking it to do. When we're talking specifically in and around peri and post menopause, I know that in this phase females are really struggling to lose weight, and they often tend to put themselves on a very restrictive diet, and again that probably means that they're under fueling for the amount of expenditure or activity that they're doing. Across the board, whether you're male or female with this, underfueling can lead to what we call low energy availability, and that is going to have a massive effect on your performance, on your daily life, and can perhaps lead to more detrimental effects of changes within your physiological systems, things like stress fractures and so on, and the end of that spectrum is what we call relative energy deficiency in sport, which is really detrimental effects on your physiological systems and will require a lot of medical intervention after that. So just ensure that you're giving your body enough fuel for the activity that you're asking it to do.
So now that we know what we should avoid over the age of 50, if you'd like to get more information or you'd like to learn what you should be doing as an over 50s runner, we are running an over 50s masterclass. You can click on the link on screen now to book your seat. I mentioned a little bit earlier around the loss of muscle mass as you get older as well. If you'd like to learn more about that and the impact that can actually have on your running, check out the video on screen now. Please, if you got value from this, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel for any future content we have.